Welcome back to Football Finance Professionals, everyone. And last time we were discussing and predicting Chelsea's financial results for 22-23. In the video before that, we were asking how they could possibly afford to continue to spend the way that they've been spending. So make sure you check out our profile if you want to see any of those videos. And the previous video predicting the financial results of Chelsea Football Club for 22-23 is up there for you to click if you want to review it. We concluded that video by saying that £115 million of a loss in 21-22 we estimate will turn into £150 million of a loss in 22-23. But what does that mean from an FFP perspective? Does it mean that they'll breach? Does it mean that they'll be okay? And what are our predictions when it comes to that point of view? In this video, we will look at that, and then we'll look at what the future holds for Chelsea if they continue to perform relatively poorly in comparison to what their fans expect and do not qualify for European competitions in the following season. But for now, we're looking at the Premier League's profitability and sustainability regulations and whether Chelsea comply with those sets of rules. And if you want to learn more about this topic in more detail, why not check out the link below, which is our course, the Professional Certificate in Football Finance, brought to you in collaboration with Loughborough University, the best sports educational establishment in the world. We're combining our professional expertise with Loughborough's academic excellence to bring you the Professional Certificate in Football Finance, which focuses primarily on football finance related topics, taking you all the way through from the basic topics of double entry all the way through to financial fair play, and comparing that even with the profitability and sustainability rules that we're going to look at now from Chelsea's perspective. For those that have watched the previous video on predicting Chelsea's financial results, you can only do so by making some assumptions, and we'll have to do the same for the FFP calculation or profitability and sustainability calculation for Chelsea Football Club. Primarily, we will assume that Chelsea operate within the larger loss limits of 105 million across a traditional 3-year period, 4 years if impacted by COVID, and are backed by their shareholders to cover the cash losses as per the rules that are the difference between the 15 million allowable loss and the 105 million pounds worth of maximum losses when it comes to profitability and sustainability. The other big assumption, and we will get into this in some detail in this video, is around the player impairment and the fact that it's not impacted any of the profitability on disposal from the previous video, and also that it's not going to impact anything in the future for Chelsea Football Club. It's very difficult for us to know exactly which players have been impaired because the disclosure isn't given in the financial statements on a player-by-player basis. But it could be that some of the players that have previously been impaired in 21-22 have subsequently been sold at a profit, and that profit has landed in our calculations. There's not much we can do about that because we simply do not know what those impairment charges have been related to. When it comes to the reconciliation of profit or loss before tax and the adjusted earnings before tax in the profitability and sustainability calculations, we're going to assume an approximate £24 million of adjustments that are normal or non-COVID related. And that's every single year in the calculation. These come from academy-related costs, depreciation, amortization of non-player intangibles, and community-related donations. We have excluded the women's-related costs because we're focusing primarily on Chelsea Football Club, the legal entity. All of the women's-related costs would sit outside of that legal entity unless they've been donated by Chelsea Football Club. Those costs haven't been disclosed in Chelsea's accounts, and therefore we would literally be estimating those figures. So we assume no relief for any women's related costs. So at the end of the 21-22 period, we can safely assume that the club did comply with Premier League profitability and sustainability rules because nothing has been heard of since. There's not been an announcement that Chelsea have broken any FFP related rules from the Premier League's perspective. That's purely based on the financial results, and based on our calculations, we can say that Chelsea are safely within the profitability and sustainability limits as a result of what's happened during that time. What has happened during that time is, based on our assumptions, an approximate £23 million of annual related costs that would routinely be adjusted as a normal course of business for Chelsea Football Club. But also COVID has hit, and the results will have been adjusted for any COVID related costs as defined by the Premier League. For those that can remember, the 19-20 season was impacted by COVID, as was the 20-21 season. In the 1920 season, we estimate that the club was able to add back £35 million worth of losses from lost revenues or additional costs that were incurred as a result of COVID. That figure increased dramatically in the following season, and those two seasons will effectively be stitched together for the purposes of profitability and sustainability as one season, taking the mean result or the average result for those two seasons. In 2021, the COVID-related reliefs totaled £98 million. So across the two seasons, which are effectively being treated as one from the Premier League's perspective, over £134 million were adjusted back from the results, which were 39 or almost £40 million of a profit before tax in 1920 and approximately £149 million of a loss in the following season, 2021. But that's not the end of the story when it comes to COVID-related costs. Under UEFA's guidelines, there were only two seasons that were impacted by COVID, but in the Premier League handbook, there was a third season, and that was 21-22. Now, what we've seen from Chelsea and from other clubs during this time is that player registrations have been impaired. That increases the losses or reduces the profits that have been made by each of the clubs, Chelsea included. Now, if the club can argue that those costs were incurred as a result of COVID-19 and can prove that to the Premier League and the Premier League accepts it, then that impairment charge will be relievable. So we've assumed that the player-related impairments have been added back as part of the profitability and sustainability calculation, and that's the primary reason why Chelsea are able to comply with the rules towards the end of 21-22. The total player impairments were over £94 million across 21-22 and the previous season. If it wasn't for those adjustments being allowable at the level that's been disclosed in the financial statements, then Chelsea would have smashed through the profitability and sustainability upper limit of £105 million. So if we take the 18-19 season, the 19-20 and 20-21 season as one season, and then 21-22 as the third season, we estimate that there is an adjusted earnings before tax over what is effectively a 3-year period of approximately £60 million. So that's comfortably within the limits. If we adjust that figure for the £95 million worth of losses, which we assume are being added back, Chelsea have smashed through that upper limit of £105 million and therefore would have breached the rules. Now, since there isn't a disclosure from the Premier League that says that Chelsea have already breached, we can safely assume that they are within the £105 million limit. But when we move on a year to 22-23, and that's the reason why we're here to try to predict the financial fair play result for Chelsea in this period, that loss is almost £150 million before tax. And again, check out our previous video if you want to understand how we got to that figure. But we can then safely assume that we can add back the normal course of business reliefs when it comes to profitability and sustainability, but there will be no further COVID reliefs as per the Premier League handbook in 22-23. So the previous adjustments to player registrations or even for lost revenues or any other additional costs that have been incurred by Chelsea would stop at the end of 21-22. Now, we believe that that's the reason why Chelsea has heavily impaired their squad to the tune of £95 million, which would have been a massive number under normal circumstances. The impact of that will reduce the amortisation in the future for Chelsea's squad. Now, again, we don't know which players they relate to, so we don't know whether they've been sold or subsequently being disposed of for nil gain or loss. But what we can estimate is the adjusted earnings before tax figure for 22-23 is approximately £125 million. So if we roll on a year and we assume £125 million of adjusted earnings before tax in the profitability and sustainability calculation for 22-23, we lose the 18-19 adjusted loss, which was estimated at almost £80 million. So we've essentially increased the losses over a 3-year period by £45 million. And by our estimations, it looks as though Chelsea are almost at that £105 million limit for profitability and sustainability. So if there are any errors in our calculation that are detrimental to the profit and loss account of Chelsea Football Club, that could put the club at risk of breaching profitability and sustainability. But by our estimations, we believe that Chelsea will probably comply with the rules, and that is the reason why they were trading players at certain points in the year to make sure that they would comply with FFP. Based purely on the financial statements, it's almost impossible for someone to look at them and think that they can comply. But what you don't see in those financial statements is how those figures can be adjusted for regular reliefs under the normal course of business and for those COVID-19 related reliefs that are one-offs or actually ended up being in 3 seasons. And that is the primary reason why there is such a difference between the adjusted earnings before tax figure and the losses, or even there was one profit in the period that we're looking at, before tax for Chelsea Football Club. What we now see is that Chelsea are really pushing the boundaries when it comes to compliance with those rules purely on a financial calculation perspective. And if Chelsea don't qualify for European competitions next season, and that competition really has to be the Champions League, then as they are about to apply for a UEFA licence, whether that's next season or the season thereafter, they will have to comply with UEFA's rules, which are much more strict than that of the Premier League. And it looks as though they're operating at around about that £105 million for the previous seasons anyway. But does that matter? And the answer is, well, not necessarily, because UEFA's rules have reset from 22-23 onwards. Having said that, we've estimated that Chelsea will make a loss of £150 million before tax in that first season. There's no profits that have been banked that can be rolled forward. Equally, there are no additional losses. So they will need to be profitable in the 23-24 season without Champions League competitions, without a shirt sponsor for the first few months of the season, and potentially that having a detrimental impact on shirt sales, and definitely will have an impact on commercial revenue. And if they do not qualify for Champions League competitions in this season that we're in now, 23-24, that will be because we'll have a reduction in what is expected to be the revenue from the Premier League's perspective as well. And the £150 million of a loss included an estimated 120 or approximately £120 million of profit on player disposals. Chelsea cannot continue to create profits on player trading unless they continue to sell academy players, and they will eventually run out. And they will also have high net book values for players that they've put on longer term contracts, because the amortization will not reduce the net book value quickly enough for them to be able to turn a profit on players. So Chelsea are really on rough ground when it comes to FFP. It looks as though they're about on the limits of the Premier League profitability and sustainability based on the previous 3 years, and it's going to be very difficult for them to comply with UEFA's financial sustainability regulations unless they can really turn something around, and that can only be on the player trading front. They are continually trying to push the player wages down, and will probably have some performance-related remuneration as part of their player contracts. But as they perform on the pitch, they'll have to pay out more in wages, and if they don't perform on the pitch, then the club may find themselves in a vicious downward spiral when it comes to financial results in compliance with either the Premier League or UEFA's financial sustainability regulation. So in conclusion, the club is on a cliff edge and needs to be very careful based on our estimations. Like we say, we may have made some errors, but what do you think? Have we missed any chunky financial impacts out of our calculations? Make sure you leave some comments below and leave them in the previous video. And if you haven't seen that, make sure you check it out on the channel. My name's Neil Wood and I'm a football finance professional. If you like the video, please leave us a like. And if you want to learn more about football finance related topics, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.